Not so live from the spare bedroom.
Mhm.
April Cummings of Cayman Life TV and Patrick Brendel from the office with the map.
That's right. Good to
Poor
see you.
Patrick. She's lost her mind again.
She's
Welcome
thinking
everybody.
about the oxtail already coming up.
Yeah, so we have a time limit today because the oxtail's on the stove, and I'm going to get yelled at if I'm not there. I told Patrick 30 minutes from now, but really it's more like 45 because I actually have to get in the car. But so it goes. So oxtail is waiting, and that means we have to dig deep and dive deep into education issues this week, which is not so hard to do because Patrick has been exploring the OES reports. Is it fair to call them reports, or is it more a kind of just like a check-in?
I think it's fair to call it a report or a summary or a letter. And they're coming from where they really stipulate is they're doing one-day thematic visits to schools. So they stress these are not inspections. So I can't call them inspection reports. To the layperson, they might be considered a cursory inspection. But as we've said before, because of the impacts of COVID and stresses related to that, the Office of Education Standards, which is the school inspection body in Cayman, had made the decision to defer all of these 3-day inspections, 2 or 3 day inspections, till the fall. And so instead, in the spring, they're conducting one-day thematics visits to like 30 to 35 schools, public and private, and they're focusing on 2 performance standards, one of which is keeping our students safe and supported, and the second one is leading and managing schools and developing links with the community. So with those 2 focal points, and one inspector will visit a school for 1 day, and they review documentation, and sometimes they have surveys of parents and students, and then it culminates in a roughly 5-page letter that they send to the principal, and then that goes on to the ministry and is posted on the OES website.
So the Office of Education Standards, I blew right past the fact that that's what OES stands for, of course. They did these visits, and there was definitely a recurring theme throughout most of the ones that I've seen so far. A lot to do with stress on teachers, stress on staff, just kind of a lot of COVID-related stress. I was trying to find one thing to sort of bundle it into, but it was all connected back to having absences pop up when you didn't expect them. A whole group of students going to be quarantined for a period of time. Just sort of the upheaval all that caused is sort of something I saw sort of running through these reports. Is that a fair assessment?
Correct, April, as always.
Sometimes I read Cayman Current and I'm on top of things as a result.
Yeah. So OES published the first batch of inspection reports, which I've gone through, and I believe there were 8. And then they've now published the second batch, and which brings us up to maybe around 15. I don't know if I'm counting right. And have just started. I've read all the reports, and I've just started reporting on the second batch of reports. But yes, definitely, I think the key words that reappear are staff are overwhelmed, exhausted, they're burnt out. I think the main takeaway for me is over the past 2 years, the school leadership and the teachers and then the support staff have all been really working hard in difficult conditions, and that is taking its due. It's having its ill effect. So it's bad ramifications kind of eroding over time, and that's manifesting itself in mental health concerns among the staff and in absences, whether that's due to quarantine periods for staff or students or outright staff vacancies where people either leave for another job or they're resigning or they're moving off island. And it's difficult for the school leaders. It's another common refrain is it's difficult for school leaders to find and hire new faculty. And it's also difficult for them to find supply teachers, which Americans might know as substitute teachers.
Right.
So I guess the 15-second summary is COVID is causing student absences. It's causing staff absences. So teachers are running around trying to cover these additional duties. And then they also have a lot of extra duties related to COVID, whether that's spending several hours per week packaging lateral flow tests, or standing and monitoring students while they make sure they wash their hands, or having to oversee canteen arrangements and social distancing, and doing extra paperwork, and having to teach virtual lessons and set those up in addition to their in-person lessons. So it's really, and also amid the general stresses of COVID that everybody's facing, of fears of being at a greater risk of exposure to COVID personally. So that's really got them worn down. And something I've seen several times is the teachers will say, and leadership will say, we're doing our best. We understand that we have to do these things, but we don't know if this is sustainable even through the end of the current academic year. So everybody's looking for that light at the end of the tunnel.
Yeah, I mean, a non-education related example would be, from my perspective, the issues with the dissemination of daily COVID numbers every day, for example, right? In the beginning, those numbers came out every single day. They may or may not have been accurate all the time, but they were, they're getting them out there. But as the days, weeks, months pass, there's a certain point of like, we can't keep doing this and all the other things we're trying to do at the same time. Right or wrong, my point being, there comes a point where you were able to sprint for a while, and then all of a sudden you're tired, you're exhausted, you haven't had a chance to heal from any of your injuries. And so you're still trying to push forward every day, but it's hard to do. And that burnout is, dude, it's no joke, man.
Yeah.
I don't want a cranky teacher, the kids are already cranky. That's not a good combination, and it's not healthy for anybody.
Right. And I think there are bright spots, and as you find in moments of extended crises, like there are lots of bright spots and positive things in the reports as well, in terms of things that the schools have been forced to do in terms of adopting new technology or enhancing public health, student health standards that that they're going to keep going forward. So we can, kids and parents can look forward to more use of technology at home, more flexibility in regards to virtual learning, more frequent and more available like hand washing setups, ways the school can adapt in case of normal flu seasons going forward, if that will ever happen again. And also real examples of principals and their deputies stepping up and showing like really real one-on-one levels of connectivity and concern for their staff as human beings. And stories about principals who take every day approach staff members individually and ask them how they're doing, making sure they have support or they know there's support available, whether it's from the school counselor or the wellness center, or maybe other, other things like I forget is it the employment?
Oh, the employee assistance program. Yeah.
That's right. Employee assistance program, or they have other relationships. So I think kind of things they may have had in place on paper in the past, but they're really making sure that the adults know that these resources are available to them, while at the same time, the teachers are focused on the students and making sure the students know that this support is available, and also supporting the family members and the student's family, and making sure that as the family unit is able to better manage what's going on. So there's, this level of caring that you can see bubbling up through the official language of the reports.
So I just was going to pop up the sort of the main story on your page, or really just, we've been talking about it in general, but overall, most of them didn't have significant concerns, at least from the ones I heard so far. However, there was an exception to that. in the case of St. Ignatius. Can you talk just a little bit about what was different at St. Ignatius, perhaps, than at some of the others, and what was the same?
Sure. And so St. Ignatius, out of the reports that have been published, was the only school where the inspector said they had significant concerns that were then forwarded to the Ministry of Education for them to follow up on. But it's kind of different degrees of the same things that you're seeing in other schools. And so at St. Ignatius, with the two of the issues, I'm actually cheating and looking at my story right now. The chief inspector, Nicholas Sheriff, conducted this particular visit, and according to his letter, he said, "We found significant concerns regarding staff well-being, the continued principal vacancy, and the governance arrangements. As such, a notice of concern was sent to the ministry." And actually, the last line, burying the last line to me is very indicative, where they say, during the visit, staff reported feeling burnt out, exhausted, and requiring counseling support. So it's kind of an extra degree of what you might have been seeing at other schools, where they're saying we need to seek assistance for our own mental health.
So not so much that there were different problems, but per se, I just want to make sure I heard it right, because my earphone was out, but a greater intensity of what the other schools had been talking about, or what they'd seen at the other schools.
Yes, and assuming you can make an apples to apples comparison, which is what I think the OES tries to do even during these kind of thematic visits. So that's as we said, that's one of the 2 points that they're charged with looking at, is the well-being of staff and students. But then the second point is the difference, and that's the criticisms of the governance arrangements at St. Ignatius. And as we've talked about in the past, in the gotta remember what year it is, which is a common problem. Before the 2020 school year, the head teacher, Emily Alexander, resigned or left St. Ignatius. Around the same time, the St. Ignatius's school board was replaced with the board was replaced with a advisory committee, which had a more limited remit of authority than the former board. So since that time, OES has flagged both the issue of the vacancy in the top leadership position and the formal governance structure as being problematic. And they did that during their last full inspection as well. So they've been consistent in their assessment. St. Ignatius did hire a new principal, a man named Martin Nugent, who came in last year in the spring. And then after one term in the spring, I believe his contract was terminated, or he's gone. So he's gone, and St. Ignatius is looking for a new principal again. So that's what the OES flagged, is they have 2 vice principals, one of which who is in charge of the primary school, and the other one's in charge of the secondary school. And together they're jointly filling the principalship role. But so the OES says, well, you don't have a principal, that's problematic. The formal head of the school, who's the parish administrator, who is the priest in charge of the church and school, he himself does not have an education background, as opposed to the previous priest in charge, who I believe did have academic and background and experience in education. So he can't personally step into that role as the head of school. And then in regard to the advisory committee, Mr. Sheriff said that the school has an advisory committee, but it does not have the remit to hold the parish administration or school principal to account. So they're not fans of the governance structure on paper right now.
Clearly. And without me knowing, of course, the specifics of how well things are or aren't going, there are sometimes, from an external perspective, you expect a certain type of hierarchy and structure. And if it's not that, then that in and of itself is a problem, let alone whether it's effective or not. That's a whole.
Yes. Correct.
It's an
Yeah,
assumption down the road.
yeah, and as in the, even though the St. Ignatius generated notice of concern, and what they did report is, in terms of like our children learning, which is, the bottom line on education, according to the great orator George W. Bush. Yeah, the kids at St. Ignatius are still learning and progressing and showing adequate progress at all levels. Everybody's still getting their work done. They're still progressing. The attendance at the school has still been there's challenges, but it's still relatively high compared to some of the other schools. And those two things aren't the focus of these visits. So you get into the structure of the report itself. So, in some other schools, say East End Primary School, their attendance rate dropped down to 30% in the fall. So, and the schools you've seen figures more like 90% is what you would expect. So 30%, wow. And then in some of the other schools, there have been significant learning gaps that have been developing over the past 2 years. And the teachers are really struggling because on top of everything else they're doing that we mentioned, they're also trying to have like extra morning math classes and clubs at the end of the day, trying to address those learning gaps. So, it's kind of what is your vantage point or perspective and what you're focusing on that maybe a parent might find is a significant concern compared to what in this limited exercise the OES inspectors within the context of this would label as a significant concern.
Gotcha. So if the criterion were different,
I suggest reading my stories, and if you have an interest in a particular school, you read the report itself, which will be in the story and linked to. And there are they're not long reports, but there are nuances in there.
Excellent. So that said, there is an exciting topic that you wanted us to talk about today that you were quite delighted by, and the country should we as well. Should we progress to said topic yet, or is there another thing you want to bring up first?
Just one more thing about the visits, and that's kind of the regular check-in on the free school meals program and the government's laptop initiative. Those are the big dollar high headline items. And without exception, the teachers, the parents, and the school staff, positive remarks on both of those initiatives, saying it's made a big difference. So, good.
A plus, or at least a good A. No, A star in the British system.
Right.
Grades and whatnot. All right, let's talk about this amazing performance from young Jordan Crooks.
Yes. So, I mean, I don't know, it had been in the news locally. I didn't feel that it had gotten the attention and the profile that perhaps that it deserved. But for people who haven't heard, university freshman by the name of Jordan Crooks, who's from Cayman, Caymanian swimmer, is going to the University of Tennessee. He set an NCAA record in the 100-yard freestyle. This is the U.S. And so out of all the freshmen who've ever swam this event in the history of the NCAA, which is the big U.S. college, he swam the fastest time ever. So
amazing, right?
Yes, and then the story you're pointing to, he followed that up by then swimming the fastest freshman 100-yard freestyle of all time. And for me, this is one of, if not the greatest sporting achievements by a Caymanian ever. Like, this is a huge deal. And to put this in perspective, in his 50 free race, the person who held the record before was a man by the name of Caleb Dressel, who, if you follow swimming, you know who he is because he's the best male swimmer in the world right now. He's number one. He won 5 gold medals in the Tokyo Olympics, and he joined the club of I think Mark Spitz and Michael Phelps as the only male swimmers to ever win 3 individual gold medals in the same Olympics. So he is like, if you put it in basketball terms, you're talking like Michael Jordan, LeBron James, Kevin Durant. Like, he's the best right now.
Big time.
And Jordan just beat his record. And if you look at the 100 free time, and that's starting to scroll down,
Yeah, let's see if I can.
Jordan's on top at number 1, Caleb's down at number 10. So so at this point in his college career, Jordan is swimming faster than in these 2 events than anybody has ever in the United States. And it's
amazing, right?
It's amazing. I mean, it's hard to tell people who don't know how amazing this is. So, I know the Crooks family, and I know they work really, really hard, really, really disciplined. This time when I saw it as a complete surprise to me, I do follow swimming here. I mean, it's such a significant improvement. It really is amazing. So hats off, congratulations.
So, absolutely. And you mentioned his parents, and I'd heard this too, that they really worked really hard to support their kids in their sport, right? And involved a lot of work, lots of traveling, training. But something must have changed here still was good, but went from good to great. Any idea what made the difference? What made that leap from I'm really good to right now the best, hopefully forever the best?
I mean, you don't know if it's age. He's gotten older, gotten stronger, got Olympics experience. What was Jordan in the Olympics? I think his sister Jillian was.
Yeah, Jillian was, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Clearly, I'm not a great.
No, it was just Brett Fraser and Jillian who went to Tokyo. But he's got an international experience. He's had the University of Tennessee level coaching, and it's not just technical coaching, but I'm sure everything from dietetics and diet and general fitness and strength exercising, and really coming and really getting that different level of focus in terms of preparation and opportunities. So
that's interesting too, though, Patrick. Like, as you've said, sometimes when you're not into the sports, especially elite sport type stuff, you don't think about things like precision diet. They're working on every single aspect of what it's going to take for this athlete to be at his or her best. It's not just let me swim some more. They're doing the right kinds of exercises. They look for optimal training, optimal nutrition, just the whole spectrum of things. And it's interesting what you said about his age too. That is not something I would have even thought of. In my head, the older we get, the more painful it is and the harder to do things. But there's a point where you go from being a young athlete to sort of this premium, your premium fitness level, and you also maybe have more drive, more focus sometimes than you might have when you were younger. So it's just really interesting. I see education as, sometimes these things, but sport is actually a really essential component as well in the development of a person. And I went to this prep school for this 1 year in the US. It was a US preparatory school for college, high school.
I didn't realize.
I went to prep school for 1 year. My senior year, I almost flunked out the first week because I had never had to study this hard in my life. And the difference was that around me were people who were all at a very high level academically. And every single one of them also participated in 2 to 3 sports, often at a varsity level. I made the JV team, yay, for football, real football, but not American football. But it was
football.
But what I'm getting at is that I saw a level of intensity that was very different, and sports were just as important to your academic success portfolio as your grades were. In fact, it was mandatory that you had to participate in 2 for the 2 of the 3 semesters in a sport, and then the third you could do something, you know, arty or musical or along that lines. And it was really recommended that you get as rounded as possible. So I mean, I just think this is not only an amazing performance, but it's also an opportunity to learn about what it takes to go from I'm good to great, really.
Yes, agreed. Yeah, and you know that Cayman has some really excellent athletes at the NCAA level in track and in field events. So you know there are these kids, 18 to 22, who are All-Americans, who are you know setting junior level records in their events. In addition to Jordan, and you know sometimes I feel like that's not like people aren't paying attention to that enough, and maybe you know they should be, and you know really celebrate that, and you know and kids playing you know basketball in the U.S. and playing real football in Europe, and you know it's really cool to you know as the longer I've been here to see kids in the youth leagues and see them when they're little kids, and then really going and excelling on a bigger stage as young adults, and that's not just in academics and profession, but also sports.
Yeah, too cool. All right, so
I feel like an old man, like a total dad.
I remember when they were just 6 years old and
Yeah.
afraid to go into the swimming pool. All right, my oxtail is waiting for me, Patrick. So I must leave you. But any final words before I go? Before we go, anything
Yeah.
we want to tell people coming up in Cayman Current?
I got one more big news item, and the Cayman
like
Current has
scoop,
a new
right?
media partner on our TVET and STEM video project. And people may have heard of it. It's Cayman Life TV with founder April Cummings. So yeah, so we're super excited.
Super excited. So much to talk about. No, it really is exciting because you guys have worked so hard on this series, and to kind of see it all come together is fantastic. I like to be a media partner. I feel special.
Yeah, and so people know, you know, in addition to Cayman Life graciously extending the reach of our documentary project with their social media channels, TV channel, etc. April herself, you know, you may not see her in the documentary, but you're sure going to hear her because she's lending the golden voice as the narrator for the series. And you know, I've heard the rough draft, heard and seen the rough draft of the first episode, and it sounds amazing, like really great.
I'm so glad. It actually is really, really interesting. And I do find it difficult sometimes to deliver words that I didn't write. And I have to say it was really easy to do. It was well written. And there's, I mean, I think people are going to find the series really, really interesting and insightful, and hopefully, you know, prompt some ideas for things that we can do to further support and expand in that sector as things go along. So we're really excited to air it. I was happy to get asked to voice it. Patrick is going to buy me a nice salad or something for, you know, no, just kidding. You know, some honey and tea for the velvet tones. But I have to say, like, it's
for sponsorship for April's lunch.
I know. Was that a plug? So that's a self-promoting plug. But no, I'm real excited about it, and I know Patrick is too, and he and Caleb worked really hard on it, and it's gonna. I think people are really going to enjoy it, and we can't wait to air it. It's going to be fantastic.
Yep.
Now it has to be, because we've.
That's all I got to say about that.
That's all I got to say about that. All right, you guys, thanks so much. Of course, always check out caymancurrent.org. Don't just wait for Patrick to chat with me about what's going on, because, you know, the best way to come up with some insightful questions to ask us to follow up on is, of course, to read the website. You have great stuff on there, Patrick. It is a nonprofit. You can sign up for a membership, is what I'm calling it this week. make a donation anytime. But it's a great project and initiative, and has a lot of stuff about different facets of education, not just locally, but also takes a look at things that are going on around the region and the world as well, right?
That's correct.
April, you're right. Once again, such brilliance. Ah, I love myself today. All right, Patrick, thank you so much. And we'll see you next week, everybody. Don't forget, again, CaymanCurrent.org, and of course, Cayman Life TV. We're here for you to share important things that make your life much better all the time.
Bye.